I'm Cliff Ribner, and I'm going to talk to you today about some passages in the Bible, in Genesis and Deuteronomy. And all of the passages of Deuteronomy are there to teach us how to live and how to realize ourselves, how to become the best human beings we can be, how we can become like that which we are the image of. In Genesis Chapter 1, God says God made us in the image of God, and he decreed that we should have dominion over the earth, over everything, moving and not moving, and be fruitful and multiply. It wasn't anything like, don't use energy so that you can save the planet. It wasn't anything like that at all. It was the opposite of these climate lunatics who want us not to use actual sources of energy. All based on nothing, by the way. There's no science that supports what they say. CO2 is a blessing. CO2 is what life depends on. We, at the present time, 0.04% of the atmosphere is CO2. After 200 years of the Industrial Revolution, spewing it out, they pretend it's poison. It's the opposite of poison. It's nonsense. We exhale it with every breath. They want us to hate human beings. That's what's fundamentally so-called environmentalism is really all about. It's an excuse to hate humans and to diminish our lives. And that's exactly the opposite of what God commanded in Genesis Chapter 1. And in Deuteronomy 5, that's where he has the 10 Commandments. And he's literally saying, I am the Lord thy God who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And these are the things you have to do to be free. He wanted us to have individual liberty, to have the most freedom we could have, but also not to kill each other, not to harm each other. So he's got those commandments in there. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not commit envy. Envy is the one emotion that is forbidden in the 10 Commandments. And he's telling us that in those commandments, he's telling us who he is, why he's telling us to do this. And those are all the commandments. He didn't forget anything. He knew that if he added any more, we would be less free. Because to the extent we are commanded to do things, our freedom is taken away. But in that case, those are the freedoms, those are the prohibitions which enhance our freedom. And in America, and in the whole English-speaking world, there is the common law, which is created, applying those principles, those very principles in the 10 Commandments to real life. And that common law is the law of free men. And the various revolutions that occurred in England, extracting power from the king, making the king recognize that when people owned their property, they actually owned it, and it couldn't be taken away except by due process. And they had to be paid for it if it was taken away. And it happens that in our country, the government has been taking away the rights of business owners to run their own businesses. That's because they already are subject to the 10 Commandments as applied in the common law. The common law accurately reflects the 10 Commandments. And everything that's forbidden in the 10 Commandments it's the only things that should be forbidden. The more things that are forbidden, the more our freedom is taken away. And God wanted us to be as free as possible without hurting each other. And that's what the 10 Commandments are for. But immediately after he gives the 10 Commandments, in Deuteronomy 6, he does something very interesting. He gives, and by the way, this next part is the central prayer for Jews. Jews have this as the central part of their liturgy. And all Jews, no matter how religious, and it's called the Shema and the Vahavta. Those are the Hebrew terms for it. But it begins, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And it uses the word hear. That's a commandment. And right before that, and elsewhere in that whole passage, he makes clear that hearing is the one thing we can do where we can actually hear the voice of God in our head. You can't see God in your head, but you can hear him. And in this prayer, what he's really doing is telling people how to hear God, how to experience God directly. Because if you can experience God directly, you can experience your soul. Because your soul was created by God in his image. And we all have one. It's what makes us divine in that sense. We die, but Our souls live on, and it's what gives us value. It's why places like America, which value individual liberty, are completely different from every communist country on the planet. Because in communist countries, they completely deny the existence of God. They completely deny the existence of the individual soul. And that's why they have no problem killing millions of people. Lenin joked about it. He said, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. And he was talking about killing millions of people. The Soviet Union, they killed 20 to 40 million people. We don't really know the full number because some of it was done on such a mass scale. And the whole country, all of the countries they dominated, lived under a reign of terror. They couldn't speak. They were always at risk of being found out. In East Germany, they had the Stasi, where you had neighbors ratting out neighbors, people listening to their neighbors, children being told in schools to turn over their parents if they said anything against the government. It was disgusting. And that's the way most of the world has had to live, in one version of that or another. In communist countries, it was very organized. They had a whole secret police. It was just like Nazi Germany. The only difference was the ideology wasn't promoting a specifically racist one like the Nazis. That's the only difference. The Nazis were not, their name was the National Socialists. They were socialists. All of the businesses in the country were commandeered by the Nazi Party. They were told what to produce. And that's what happens in communist countries. And that's what they're trying to impose on us here. All of those federal bureaucracies, what they do is they take away all the attributes of ownership having to do with command. Because and being a free country, we're supposed to be able to act first, and then if we act badly, we get punished under the common law. And that punishment can be criminal or civil. But if you act badly, you have to pay for it one way or another. You hurt someone, they're allowed to sue you for hurting them. You have to either intend it or it has to at least be negligent. That's what the common law requires, and that's what God requires. You have to actually, you're responsible for your own actions that you intend or don't take responsibility for yourself. But these words in Deuteronomy 6 are really amazing. First of all, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Hear that in your head. And he's saying hear as a command. And he's telling you God is one. Everything, God is literally everything. All that is, was, and ever will be is God. And we can sense that. He's telling us how to experience self-realization. And he says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God. And here he tells the attributes he has given us. Love the Lord with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. He's making clear those are three different powers that we have to experience this love of God. And loving God means loving all that is, including ourselves. There's nothing in there about hating yourself at all. It's the opposite. But the fact that he talks about those three things being separate, that's exactly the way they were seen at that time. All thy heart, they believed that what we consider thinking was in your heart, that the brain really, they thought of the brain as being something different. The brain is where you experience these things. But your heart is where the thinking, where the mind was. That was where they thought the mind was. And we know this from other sources. All thy heart, all thy soul. The soul is the most important. It's our self. It's our sense of self. And that gives us power. And thy might. That's what that really means, is your will. So that the powers we have are the fact that we can think, and we can intend, and we can will things to happen. We can. So that's what he's saying, though. You should love God with all three of those attributes, and we have them. That's another. He's making that point that we have all those attributes. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart. Again, that's where the mind was. It's not just where your heart is pumping. They didn't know about biology. But that's where they thought the thinking really takes place, is in the heart. They may have been right. Who knows? Maybe the brain, it does different stuff. And these words and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thy house. And when they talk about thy house, that word is actually talking about your body. the body was called the place of nine gates, or the city of nine gates. That's what and those being the five senses and your five means of action, your hands, your feet, and your head. So that was the city of nine gates. And when he says when you're sitting in your house, means when you're just by yourself thinking. When you walk by your way, there thou shalt speak of them when you walk by the way. It means tell other people about it. Don't keep this to yourself. So you tell it to your children, you tell it to others when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. So think about it while you're sleeping if you can, and then when you get up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be for frontlets between thine eyes. There he's explaining, it's actually a meditation technique. When it's a sign upon thy hand, your hand is what does things. So your hand is always being governed by these thoughts. But these words, if you're meditating quietly and you want to experience God, the place that you experience it is the word, because he gave us these words, the frontlets between your eyes. So it's in front of you. The religious Jews wear these things called phylacteries and tefillin, where they have basically the words of this prayer in a little box that they put on their head. You don't have to do that. I mean, if they get the benefit of, if that helps them meditate, wonderful. But you don't have to do that to get the benefit of this prayer. This prayer is the directions of how to meditate. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of the house and upon thy gates. Again, that's not just talking. Jews use mezuzahs. It's a little thing that has this prayer in it. They put it on the doorposts of their house and upon thy gates. Certainly, it doesn't do any harm. But what that's really about is have it on all of your senses and on all of your means of action, your hands, your feet, and all of your senses. So it's saying, it's giving you a direction on how to achieve attention to something. And having attention to something is using those powers that you have, your heart, your soul, and your might. And by focusing your attention on God that way, you can hear it. And that's what he's doing. He's in this passage, he's giving directions on how we can achieve self-realization. This is immediately after the Ten Commandments. So between those commandments, and the Ten Commandments are different, he actually says they're written in stone. The words, and he wrote them in 2 tables of stone. So those are the only commandments in the Bible that are actually written in stone. Everything else, it's a commandment from God. You don't have to do it. You're not going to go to hell if you don't do it. It's not a mortal sin the way breaking those other ones is. But it's all for our benefit. These are not simply commandments to take away from our freedom. These are commandments to enhance our freedom. And that's the most important part of the Bible. And that's true. That Bible is the Bible for both Christians and Jews. And anyone else can learn from it as well. But this is really important stuff that God gave us long ago. And I wanted to show how it's been applied brilliantly in the English-speaking world, and how in America, because we rid ourselves of a king and we gave ourselves a constitution dedicating this country to individual liberty. Everything in there is dedicated to minimizing the federal government, and the federal government it doesn't exist except to the extent it's created in the Constitution. And the 9th and 10th Amendments say that any power the federal government is not given in the Constitution, it doesn't have. So what's happened is, particularly in the last 150 years, the federal government's been taking all sorts of powers it's not entitled to. And it's diminished our lives. None of that has benefited us at all. All of those alphabet agencies are worthless. And that's exactly what God would have said it if he was going to comment on it. But none of those agencies do anything of any value. They've made us poorer. They've restricted opportunities. They've restricted choices. There are about 10 different agencies that tell automobile companies how to build their cars and what they have to have in them. Now you can't even turn on the car unless you put the seatbelt on, or the car won't even go on. They've got all sorts of stuff like that, treating us like idiots. And anyway, all those agencies are terrible. None of them are permitted under the 10 Commandments because they all restrict our freedom. And the 10 Commandments, God told us everything that's forbidden. and nothing else is forbidden. Everything else is permitted. And to the extent our country, which is dedicated to individual liberty, tries to impose restrictions on our freedoms that are not in the Ten Commandments, it is violating the Ten Commandments. And our country is supposed to uphold the Ten Commandments. It's not supposed to be violating them. And it's not right that some people in our country get the government to do their dirty work and violate our freedoms. As if, for example, taking more taxes than they should. If taxes are a form of theft from the people, it has to be for a good cause. In the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, it says it has to be for the general welfare or the defense of the country, and that's it. It can't be taxed or spent on anything else. It can't be spent on things like bridges and, anything else. It has to be for the real general welfare. Welfare is completely unconstitutional. The federal government's not supposed to be in the business of giving food stamps or any of that stuff. The Agriculture Department, which forbids farms from selling food directly to people. You ought to see the stuff the Agriculture Department does. It's disgusting, and it limits our choices, and the whole thing ought to be abolished. It doesn't help farms. It was originally created under the pretext that they were going to help farms. It doesn't. It ruins farms. It's the biggest disaster in the country. Anyway, I'm Cliff Ribner, and I hope you like this video. And if you do, so indicate and tell other people about me and this video. And go to my website, cliffordribner.com, and read my book, Freedom's Last Stand. Thank you.